nanohub.org.
Online simulation, and more for nanotechnology.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us from all over the world. We are happy to have Ethan give our hands-on workshop on machine learning today. Ethan is a PhD student in my group. He joined Purdue in 2021, and he has a degree in material science and engineering from Wright State University. Wright State University is not far from West Lafayette, Indiana. It's in Ohio, outside of Dayton, and it's named after the Wright brothers. So Ethan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about large language models and simplifying computational simulations. So I want to dive into how we're using large language models to begin to automate more aspects of the research process. But before I get to that, I want to just give a little quick refresher to some of the key aspects of LLMs that my colleague, Dr. Verduzco, gave last week. So we have embeddings, and these are high-dimensional representations of words or phrases that capture their meanings based on the context in which they appear. It's basically a way to turn words into numbers and make the learning process easier. And then we have attention and transformers, and these are essentially what allows these models to focus on relationships between different parts of a text. And then a lot of data. They're large language models, and they generally need a lot of data to perform well. Check out, again, my colleague Dr. Verduzco's seminar. There's going to be a link up shortly for more information on that stuff. So to summarize, a large language model is a type of artificial intelligence that processes and generates human-like text based on the patterns and examples it has learned from a vast data set. With a large dependence on data and training resources, there are a select few groups capable of producing the best models, and the best models are getting good. As mentioned in the seminar last week, they are good at these three tasks. So translation, text and image generation, mainly the text generation for the large language model part, but then question and answer sessions as well. And so these are all things that are fairly in line with tasks that I do every day as a computational material scientist. How do we use them? How do we use them in science? So they can make it easier to sift through a large amount of information and provide summaries. Summarizing information from publications, and a journal has a bunch of papers within them, and then from the papers, we funnel that information down, and ChatGPT is able to synthesize summaries from that information. I also use them for much of my coding, whether small auto-completions like what is shown here, or debugging tasks where the model aids in sorting through syntax. It's also capable of giving you code explanations, and those are also particularly useful. And this QR code up in the corner is another talk given by another member of our group, Kat Nichol, about using large language models as coding assistants. So check that out if you're interested in it. The next area that they can be used for in science is extracting AI-ready data from publications. So they're becoming more and more capable of extracting this data. And many of these efforts utilize LLMs, but are often combined with other techniques as well for efficient and accurate extraction. Then finally, the fourth one is what we're going to discuss today, an interface between researchers and tools. Different software tools like LAMPS and a computational researcher are what we're going to focus on GPT being able to do. So LLMs in general are general. And the question is, how much do they know about science? So science is a relatively small part of this large, complex picture of the knowledge and the data that LLMs have and are given. And with this being a relatively small part, we want to know, what does it know about science? Does it know about lamps? Some of these more specific computational softwares that we deal with on a daily basis. So we want to look a little bit deeper and see what they can do. So I want to talk a bit about my typical procedure for running experiments and what that looks like. So this is me, but not actually me, but like a computational scientist. And I write scripts that go into computational software. I focus on lamps, but many of my colleagues do VASP or quantum espresso. And then I request the supercomputer to run my simulation, and it outputs my results. So traditionally, I've created these scripts based on scripts from other group members. Maybe they've been passed down to me and I modify them by browsing the documentation. And LAMPS actually has really good documentation, but it can still take some time to sort through everything, especially when fitting multiple commands together. So I've played around a little bit with the other two software packages here, but I haven't built up much knowledge and intuition for their syntax like I have with LAMPS. So this is a feedback cycle where we get the data from the supercomputer and then we run more simulations. And so I want to focus a little bit more. The place that we're going to go deeper is these scripts that we're giving to run the simulation software. So as you can see, these are what the scripts look like. And as you can see, they're complex. They allow for a lot of control over the simulations, but they're not easily translatable into physics terms, except for by people who are experts in the field and who have spent time working with like the specific software. Scrolling through documentation for hours or constantly asking coworkers for knowledge are viable strategies, but more accessible simulation running can lead to much quicker results and more useful data generation. So in making computational simulations more simple, the traditional approach has been to take an input script and make a GUI where there's drop-down boxes and tweakable parameters where the script is generated automatically from the GUI. Now this is great, and it enables a much broader audience to run these types of material science simulations, but the options are only as broad as the developers can envision. So we're looking to a new class of methods, which we're just going to call the current methods, where with the development of LLMs, there's been like a growing interest in using them to set up a simulation exactly as is desired. So instead of drop-down boxes, you just give a detailed description of the type of simulation you want to run. And ideally, the complex scripts I showed you earlier can all be created with just a few descriptive sentences. So LLMs also have the capacity to give explanations of the commands used for people looking to gather an efficient understanding of documentation. So there's a few different ways that these large language models can help. And there are a lot of papers that still don't include simulation scripts, and having the ability to have a starting point script for the method sections can really aid reproducibility in these as a computational material scientist. This is a recent paper that is up on arXiv by myself and Dr. Verduzco and Dr. Strachan, and it will hopefully be published in the near future as well. But we gathered a few different excerpts of method sections. One is shown here. And we looked at OpenAI's GPT-4's ability to produce useful LAMP scripts. So that is what we're going to go into with the hands-on activity. So I want to show you really quick what happens with the tool before I walk through it myself in the browser. But basically, we have a GUI, and this is a little bit older version than what you'll see today. But you fill in a prompt, and with this prompt, you generate a LAMP script directly from with GPT. Now you need an API key, one of OpenAI's API keys, and I'll explain more about that. But when the script is generated, then you upload a potential file or any extra files you might need to run the simulation, and then you click the run button, and it runs. And so we then will upload the results onto NanoHub into a database, and you can pull them down yourself and look through them, plot them, analyze the data however you might normally. And we won't go into this today. This is on a future iteration of the tool. But there's also ChatGPT or GPT-4 in general is particularly good at plotting data as well, like making very simple Python scripts that can just automatically plot the data that you generate from the LAMP simulation all in one. So that'll be later. Look out for that. But today, we are just going to do the LAMP simulation running and look at the results. Okay, so I've already got the link pulled up. So the first thing that you're going to want to do if you are going to run some of these is download or click on this link to a potential file. So when you do that, it downloads, so keep it somewhere then you know where it is, and then launch the tool. We've got our tool here, and so this at the top, basically just a good explanation of how to get the OpenAI API keys, and a little bit of a summary. And so to get your API keys, if you don't already have them, click on this link right here. And so authentication required, so I'll log in really quick. Okay, so I created an API key earlier today, basically by just clicking on this new secret key. But I had also already set up my account in terms of like connecting a card. So if you don't have that yet, you might need to go first to this account/billing/overview and add a payment method. So it should be, I think the minimum you can do is $5. So I've been using this a ton and I've still got $3 left. So you'll get more use out of it even after today if you have other things to use it for, or if you use it more today or with this tool. But so yeah, so add a payment method if you don't already have that, and it should be pretty simple to follow the instructions to get it. And then you will want to go back to this platform.openai/API keys after you've done that, and then create a new secret key. So you can name it anything you want. And I'm not going to create one right now because it'll pop up and this is being recorded. But right after you click the create secret key button, copy that, and then that's what you'll use later for the tool. So I've already got my secret key, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that in off screen. I have my API key, and I stored it locally on my NanoHub thing, so we can't access the keys, and then enter a username. So you can enter your NanoHub username or really anything that you want to associate with whatever simulations you're running. So I am going to plan to do an aluminum simulation, and I'm going to make the first one fail on purpose. And we'll get to that in a second. So we have a few examples, and these are all examples of the prompts that we chose to look at in the paper that we have up on arXiv. So example 1 is the most simple, and so that's what I'm going to do here right now. So it auto-populates this box with a reasonable prompt to create a lamp simulation. And you can fill this box in with whatever you want. These are just examples, but this one's generally pretty good at generating usable scripts. If you experiment with other stuff, you might have a varied amount of success. So I'm going to generate the script because I've got my API key in. I deleted it. That's why you don't see it here now. But GPT-4 is currently generating the script. And it's a fairly simple lamp script of an aluminum simulation. And so the important things to look at right off the bat are what the potential style is. So in lamps, or what the potential file is, sorry. So in lamps, you need a potential file, basically a mapping of atom separations where it determines the forces that the atoms are experiencing. And so I'm going to upload that. So I have this potential file, and this is the same one that you would have downloaded from the tool page earlier. And it happens to match this. It might match yours. This is the most common string that it produces when doing this prompt, but sometimes it doesn't produce it. So if it's not, you're going to want to edit and change it to exactly what that is. So now this looks like a pretty good script from what I'm familiar with, but I said I wanted to make it fail on purpose. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to just delete this portion. And I know that it's going to be missing some arguments, and so that it will fail. So I'm going to click run, and it's going to send the simulation, hopefully, to the compute cluster that we have access to. So it's currently checking for a cached result, which basically is checking the combination of inputs that I have and seeing if those have been done before. Since they haven't been done before, it is executing the sim tool. And now this will probably take about 2 to 3 minutes to execute the sim tool. The time it takes to send the job to the cluster and to get the results back is roughly 2 to 3 minutes. This simulation actually, since it's going to fail, should only take like 1 or 2 seconds. So while that's running, I'm going to go ahead and look back at the chat and questions, see if there's anything that we have. So the prompt that I use, you can get by just using the drop-down box. So the drop-down box, example 1, aluminum equilibration, will auto-populate this prompt into the toolbox. And then the other two are different ones as well. Yeah, hopefully you guys had not too much trouble getting API keys and getting things to work. I don't see too many issues. Okay, so once you generate your key, you want to copy and paste it into this box, and then click the store/fetch key. And so that will basically like remember your API key for the future. So if you come back to the tool and you click the button store/fetch key, it'll fetch the key from your local NanoHub directory and pre-populate this. So generally, you guys all should see strings here that are your secret key. I just deleted mine to not expose it on the recording. Yes, most the API key needs to be funded. Generally, they're only a couple cents per run. Um, yeah. Okay, so it looks like we are through with the simulation. So to check the results of the simulation, usually the first step that you do in LAMPS is to look at the log file. So I'm going to download the log file and pull this up. So the file looks like this. So LAMPS is running properly for the first bit. And then we see that eventually when it gets to this step that I erase some of the arguments, it fails. So this is what you generally do in the troubleshooting process of LAMPS. Look at the log file, go back and iterate on your script. And so the LAMPS run went through, but we didn't get any results. So I'm going to go back to the script and hopefully refill in this portion. And then, so 500,000 is a decent amount of steps for this simulation. 500,000 would roughly take 7 or 8 minutes. So I'm going to cut it down to 5,000 just so that we get a nearly instant result. So the other thing I need to do then is change this, because this has to be a unique, the username run ID combination has to be unique for every time you run. So I'm going to make this success. Hopefully it works so that that's true. And then I'm going to hit run again. So again, it's checking for a cache result. It shouldn't see one as long as that combination doesn't exist. And it will run again. Username and run identifier or anything. So username is basically a way to like track a set of runs. So like you can make it your NanoHub username if you want, or you can make it like maybe you're trying a specific kind of simulation someday, and you name it like aluminum dash test dash heating or something. And then you have like particular run IDs within that, but you can name the combination anything you want. If you're getting an error while running the generate lamp script with GPT, your API key may not be in properly or working properly. Seems to be running not found error. So in general, a good place for potential files is a website called OpenKim. OpenKim. So this website actually that's right here. This is where this potential is stored in general. And like again, we have it linked on the tool page where you can just download this specific potential directly. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of open source potentials, and a lot of times people will link them in their publications as well. Okay, so the tool finished up. So I'm going to go ahead and download the log file again. And this time, we see that it actually outputted a bunch of results. And the total wall time was only 4 seconds. Again, there's a lot of communication, a lot of time spent on the communication between sending the job to the cluster and getting the results back. But like for a lot of like actual production level simulations, generally the LAMP simulation is going to take much longer. Great, we've got a usable output. And so I'm going to go ahead and download the YAML file as well. So the YAML file is a way of formatting the data in a really neat way, so that we're both storing this on NanoHub so that it's queryable, but also this can be like fed into ChatGPT to directly make plots. It's really good at understanding this format of data, and then really good at making the plots based off of it. So this is a good way to do that. Similar to CSV files, but slightly different. And then the other button, this download.zip, will basically download a zip folder of all of the files that were generated during your LAMPS run. And some simulations, you might have a specific file that is output at a specific time that's not the log file or your data. And so you would get that in there. You would just download the zip, unzip it, and you should see everything that it creates. So we've got one more step with this, which is the method section. And so this is just another API call, and it is feeding in this LAMP script that we generated earlier and slightly edited. And it just makes a very detailed description of what is going on. So this is the kind of thing that could really help with future accessibility of data and understanding the scripts in general. GPT-4 is able to create explanations of these scripts at a pretty high level that's useful for a better understanding of it in general. So I'm hoping Juan Carlos will be able to handle most of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move back to the presentation. Hopefully it worked for some of you. I know it's a little bit tricky to get a lot of these things to work all at once. Yeah, we ran through these steps. Take a minute, I guess, just to look through. How did it go? Did you guys get things to run? Did you try anything other than the standard prompts? And then I will get back to the presentation. Yeah, in this tool, you can also, well, it's a little trickier to do that, but yeah, if the APM isn't working for some of you, you can try copy and pasting a working script and potentially generating or running your LAMP simulation like that. But fetching the API key only works if you already have stored your API key. So if you've inputted the API key at least once and then click the green fetch/store button or store/fetch button. So that's mainly for like repeated use. So if you come back the next time, it'll automatically populate that from your past use. Okay, so I don't see too much, but we can go back through that later. I'm going to talk a little bit about the results that we got from our, that we talked about in our paper. So we had a prompt, we gave it to GPT-4, and it outputs something like this. And in our experiments, it worked sometimes. So we wanted to try to quantify what that sometimes means. So so we break down the scripts into 4 different categories of data. And so these are represented by the different highlight colors. So we have our neon green with commands that are always correct. These are generally common LAMPS commands that you need to set up the simulation. Light green are commands that often match your default values, and they aren't really needed. Sometimes they are. But then yellow are the commands that are generally different across simulations. And in particular, these scripts often had slightly different yellow things. And these are arguments to LAMPS commands in general. And then highlighted in red is a command that is just flat out incorrect. So in this case, it makes the system already at 5 lattices large, and then it adds an additional unnecessary replication. So this is just not what's asked for in the prompt. But in general, it does pretty well. So we have broken down our results. So we looked at a set of 10 prompts, a set of 3 prompts, and we used these prompts 10 times a piece to see how well the LAMP scripts are generated. So these are our metrics, and so we have 4 main metrics, 2 accuracy and 2 reliability. And so for the accuracy, we have script validity, which is the fraction of scripts that run in LAMPs, and the simulation accuracy is the fraction of scripts that can completely follow the instructions that were given. So then we have 2 reliability metrics, where the consistency measures the similarity of the files that are generated, and then we have usefulness, which determines the closeness to a gold standard solution. So as you can see, as the prompt complexity increases from prompt 1 to prompt 2 to prompt 3, we see the metrics go down a little bit. So generally GPT gets a little worse, but it does very well with these simple simulation scripts. So this is to say that running the code is delegated to the AI assistant, but the domain expertise is still not delegated. The verification and validation is still on our side, but instead of us writing the scripts ourselves, we now have an AI assistant that is aiding in the script writing process. So yeah, so it also has script explanation abilities, as I showed you at the end of the walkthrough of the tool. It can also generate method sections. And so generally these are pretty good and these are pretty tunable to what you want. So you can write things like a very short method section or a long method section, but there's generally a lot you can do with the prompts to make very good descriptions of the LAMP scripts, or potentially your VASP or your Quantum Espresso scripts as well. LLMs are good at generating these technical input files despite the relatively small portion of LLMs that are focused on science, and like the data of LLMs that are focused on science. And then the even smaller amount of focus on these unique input languages like LAMPS, VASP, Quantum Espresso. And I forgot to add that too, sorry. But LLMs at the interface of human and researcher can accelerate progress in computational material science, and it can be faster to accumulate simulation knowledge and easier to get started for people that are just starting out. And so with like this NanoHub tool and the storing of the simulation results and of the inputs, LLMs can also be a key player in facilitating these better fair data practices with the logging of simulation results, allowing us to have sets of AI-ready data. So yeah, thanks for listening to my talk. I hope the walkthrough went well for most of you, and there will eventually be a recording available to go back through it if you need to. So thank you.
Very nice, Ethan. Thanks for the presentation. We have a few questions from the audience. A lot of the questions have been answered, but I guess if they're not clear, we can go back to them. So the first question is whether the tool has capacity to run large scale simulations. So are we submitting here, Ethan, or is this running on the front ends?
Yeah, so these simulations are running on a cluster here at Purdue. And so you can get pretty large. The simulation that I showed today was a fairly small simulation, and that's why it only took a few seconds. But I don't believe we have infrastructure currently for like increasing the number of nodes. So it will always just use one compute node, but it's a pretty strong compute node.
How many cores?
128 cores for the commute. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a decent amount of scaling that you can get with just that.
Another question, does it work with the free version ChatGPT, the 3.5 version of ChatGPT?
Yeah, so the tool does not. The tool needs an API key, and the API keys are all paid as far as I'm aware. But the script generation does work with ChatGPT 3.5. Putting these prompts in, generally you get semi-reasonable scripts. They're not as good as GPT-4 on average, but especially with the simpler prompts like the aluminum one that I showed, you're probably going to get close to something that works most of the time.
And someone is asking whether it's a customized version of GPT-4 and.
Yeah, so currently the version that we're using with this is just the standard version of GPT-4, the standard GPT-4 API. In the future, we do really hope to apply a few different techniques that will make this tool sort of specialized in understanding the LAMMPS documentation and the format of LAMMP scripts, so that we can have like something that's a lot better than GPT-4. And GPT-4 is already pretty good.
Ram asks, can we use physics-informed neural networks to speed up traditional simulations? And I can take that on. I think you can. This is a research topic. Okay, it's not something that just works off the shelf. Maybe Juan Carlos can. We performed not using physics-informed neural network, but something. A machine learning approach using convolutional neural networks to learn from MD simulations and then being able to make the predictions, predict the outcome of an MD simulation much faster, 10 to the 8 speed up. So maybe we can share our work. This is a topic of a lot of research currently. It's not standard. So can we use this tool can be used to generate other input files? And the answer is yes. Not the tool itself, you can use to generate an input for anything. Of course, the tool, when you click run, it will try to run LAMMPS. We're working, I don't know if it's deployed, but we have a tool that works with Quantum Espresso. That's a tool for a code for DFT simulations. So if you're interested in Quantum Espresso, we have something very similar. And we don't use ANSYS in our group or Abacus, but in principle, if there's enough training material available on the web, you would expect this to work similarly. Okay, it all depends on how much open material is available so that these models can train. Anything to add, Ethan, to that?
No, yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think in general, I would expect it to be able to generate input files for those softwares. But yeah, it all depends on how much open data was included in the training.
Yeah, so someone asks whether ragging would work, would make it better. Ethan, what would be your thoughts on ragging?
Yeah. So we're really interested in ragging, and we've started a little bit with accumulating the LAMMPS documentation to use to basically show the model, or to give the model a series of the LAMMPS documentation, and then when we ask the model the question, basically it sorts through the documentation and sort of answers directly. And so yeah, we think that RAG would be a really good technique for making a better and more efficient interface between the researcher and LAMMPS, or anything like Quantum Espresso and VASP as well. Yeah. All of those would probably be good for.
For sure. So hi, Tim. How are you doing? So Tim Wolf asks, are there a means of connecting these to existing SIM tools or plans to do so eventually? And the answer is yes. This tool actually runs a SIM tool under the hood, and it's relatively easy to connect these things. Okay. The answer is yes, Tim. And anyone who wants to contribute to this, anyone can deploy a tool. Anyone can check out what Ethan and Juan Carlos have done and tweak it and publish your own tool that connects to whatever your favorite code is.
Yeah.
Maria asks, I'm very curious about which Sentinel analysis ChatGPT does about this. And a smiley face. I'm not sure what Sentinel analysis is.
I assume it's like sentiment analysis.
Yeah. So I think ChatGPT is happy that it can help people like Ethan. Makes it happy. By the way, so there's evidence that if you're nice to ChatGPT, you get better answers.
Yeah.
If you ask please and use kind words, you get more accurate answers. So someone asked, have you considered using open source LLMs like Llama for this kind of work? Ethan?
Yeah. So we're looking into Olama as well. There's in general, a lot of the open source models aren't quite as good as GPT-4, but they're getting better all the time. And I think what we want to do is a comparison of GPT-4 with some of the best open source models with by themselves and with ragging at some point as well. We're definitely interested to see how that plays out.
And Tim wonders whether ChatGPT would be trained on active sequential learning done on other NanoHub webinar tools. And as long as it's accessible, it's going to be used to train. So, all right. Well, everyone, I think we've addressed all the questions. Ethan addressed all the questions. So let's give Ethan a hand for a terrific presentation, and we invite all of you to keep coming back to our seminars. And if you have ideas, you can all publish a tool just like this on NanoHub and keep using our tools. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys.